Hello, and welcome to Spilling the Milk, the podcast where we talk about breastfeeding. You know, the thing that moms have been doing since the beginning of time, and yet it's still not really talked about as much as it needs to be. We're here to fix that. Today, my guest is Adrian Fear. She is an international board-certified lactation consultant and owner of Huron River Lactation in Milford, Michigan. It was so great to talk to her. She is a wealth of knowledge. I would like to refer to her as the Mary Poppins of lactation consulting because during our interview, she just kept pulling out her bag and pulling out new goodies that you didn't know what was going to come out of the bag next. And I honestly learned quite a bit. It keeps me humble. As much as I learn about breastfeeding, as much as I've done it myself, as much as I've talked to other people, there's always more to learn, more experiences to share. And so I'm so glad we got to talk. And since she's local to me, I feel so good now that I can confidently refer moms who come to me looking for a lactation consultant to Adrian, and they can benefit from her services. Please enjoy my conversation with Adrian. I'm generally interviewing moms about their experience breastfeeding. I had someone who talked about her experience with the baby having a tongue tie. Someone else, she had a pandemic baby and she ended up exclusively pumping. So there's some, interesting stuff there.
Yeah.
But to speak to you, a lactation consultant, well, you're both a mom and a lactation consultant. So I feel like you are a wealth of knowledge on this topic. And yeah, I would love to just hear maybe how you got into being a lactation consultant, but I'm guessing maybe it first starts with you being a mom yourself and feeding your babies.
Yeah. So we had all of our kids at home, born with a midwife, which for us, that just felt like the most natural thing. My kids are very mainstream kids. We're in public schools. They play on tablets. We're pretty normal, except we had a home birth for all the kids.
I love that.
So our first was born and he did not latch. Mm-hmm. Pretty classic, just wouldn't latch after birth. Mm-hmm. I mean, we took all the classes, we did all the things. We had the perfect birth. There was no interventions and he just didn't. And I don't know why. And I've sat and analyzed it so many times in my head, what in the world happened that he didn't latch. So 48 hours after, an IBCLC came to our house and we troubleshooted it. And then we ended up finger feeding for 14 days, which I have no idea how, looking back, we did it. And I pumped during those 14 days. And then one day he just magically started latching.
But I love that because so if you hadn't had someone supporting you in that solution, because that's kind of
it would have never worked. And right. I looking back on it, my husband was the key factor in all of it too, because he did all the finger feeding and then I would turn around and pump.
Yeah.
I don't know how we did it. I don't know if we could have done it. If that had been a subsequent child, would we have done it or would I have stuck it out? But
it's a good question. Well, and when you say finger feeding, for anybody who doesn't really know what that means,
I have my work bag right here. I brought it upstairs with me today.
Oh, cool. You have a doctor bag, but it's
I do. Yeah. It's my mobile. I call it my bag of crap.
Yeah.
Hang on. I take this where's my camera? I take this little line and I attach it to my finger. And then the other half of this goes onto a syringe, which is a 20 ml syringe. And you put your finger into baby's mouth with my little line attached to the side, and baby pulls milk through the syringe.
Wow.
So you finger feed we did it for 14 days.
Yeah. And obviously it still would have to be as frequent. So
yeah. You're still that every 2 hours. I stock 20 ml syringes. So most likely you're doing multiple syringes of pumped milk or formula to get that baby to latch.
Yeah. And I'm curious because I've also heard of putting some milk on a little spoon and feeding them. Is that better or worse?
Feeding. Oh my gosh. It would take you forever to spoon feed. Spoon feeding is awesome when we're hours old, and that volume is like that teeny tiny volume. But like, I swear I grabbed a bottle and she probably walked off with it. Like to feed like a volume, like a bottle volume, like no one's gonna spoon feed. I don't think I've ever convinced anyone to spoon feed in 6 years. So I do convince a lot of people to finger feed though.
Right. And that's so part of what I hope to do is just provide more options for people. And my whole thing is that like giving your baby breast milk is a spectrum from 100% exclusive, always from the breast, to 100% always formula. And in between those two extremes is like every possible option. And actually yours, 2 weeks of finger feeding, that's the first I've heard of that. But now we know that's an option for somebody.
It is. I mean, when I come out to clients' houses, like I have all these supplies in my bag and stuff. I walk you through it. I show you how to do it. I have you do it on baby. And then I provide you with like a handout on it. And then I send you a video with it as well. So there's like the whole, like you learn in different ways. I'm trying to hit all of them and stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And so you didn't become a lactation consultant until after that. Like you experienced that as a mom first.
So I was planning on going back to school for a master's program, and then I left and I kind of changed paths and pursued becoming an IBCLC. And it took me about 5 years to work through those requirements and the boards and hours. And then the funny part was I was actually employed by that IBCLC who came to my house.
That's really full circle.
Yeah, it was. And it's always been like this very emotional, like guarded thing. I'm like, you kind of steered my like schooling, and I changed directions because of this relationship I had with someone. Yeah. And I was with that group practice for 5 years, and then I just left and went out on my own a little over 6 months ago.
That's so cool.
So,
well, now I know who to refer people to, because I run a monthly support group for pregnant moms in Brighton. And recently I was asked, like, do you have any doula recommendations? Some sort of like compiling doula recommendations. And now I would also like to have, lactation consultant recommendations. And I guess one question people often have is, are your services covered by insurance?
So yes. Okay. So insurance is kind of this weird thing in Michigan. So I've paired with the Lactation Network, who essentially is like a billing company, or they're a DME or a direct, like a medical equipment provider is what a DME is. So if a client is interested in booking, I get all the information and make sure I travel to you because I don't go everywhere. And then I send you a link to the Lactation Network, and they kind of run your insurance behind the scenes. Most of the time you get 6 or more visits with me. It does not hit your deductible, and it doesn't hit any copays. I do charge a mileage fee. I usually only collect it twice. And then you get like 1 million visits. I can't say I really use all 6 most of the time. And then I come to you. So I bring my giant bag. I have this huge professional scale so I can get a weight on baby when I'm there. And then I leave you with some pretty detailed notes. I chart it. I send everything over to your pediatrician as well, letting him know we met. Here's what we saw. Here's my concerns or not my concerns. And then clients are welcome to email me as much as they need after the visit as well. So I try not to leave you hanging. I will say I do miss emails at times. So
is there like a golden window of opportunity where you really want to be there to intervene? Like if it's gone on too long, it's almost like,
those older babies are a little tricky just because we're set in our ways. Usually I see people after you come home from the hospital. So usually I get that text in the hospital like, hey, baby's not latching. And I'm like, okay, when are you going to be home? Let's get you on the schedule. I'll be there the next day. So, I mean, the sooner the better, especially if we're dealing with more complex issues and stuff.
But that means someone like was in contact with you before they even had the baby. Like they knew they were going to watch your services.
Sometimes that happens. I would say it's probably 50 or 50, or they just shoot me a message at 1 o'clock in the morning that they had a baby and were struggling and they go home tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let me get you on the schedule. I'll be there.
So they're in their hospital bed on their phone is really what's happening.
Okay. And they know they're having problems. So I get kind of the whole gamut of it all. Like sometimes it's early, sometimes it's a couple weeks in or a couple days in. I don't know. Send me a message. I'll get you on the schedule.
And you had home births, but I will say in a hospital birth, it's sort of a grab bag of what your experience will be like getting support in the hospital. You might have a nurse who just happens to be very good at it. You might have a lactation consultant who's on vacation that day, or you delivered at night and she doesn't come until Monday morning. That's
I always kind of like, I love when people tell me about, because I asked during my like intake, I'm like, so how was lactation? Did they tell you anything? What was their thoughts? And I kind of sit there and I'm always like, oh, the good stuff is coming. And it is sometimes the stuff that they tell me, I'm like, where are these people getting this? Like,
I don't know.
Where we like one of them recently was like, yeah, I was told I had flat nipples. I mean, her nipple was so big. It was so grabbable. I'm like, flat nipple. But
bringing up flat nipples. Okay. So that was my experience with my first one. It was just like a last ditch effort of the hospital lactation consultant was like, I don't know, you could like try a nipple shield. And I was like, I've never heard of this before. My mom like went to CVS and bought one. And actually we did for the first week or two. And then eventually he didn't need it anymore. But there was not much support around that. And then I've read some people are like, don't ever use it because it doesn't build your supply. And like, so I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
So I use nipple shields a lot. I have all this, they're sized. I don't know if you knew that.
Nope.
They come in various sizes and shapes and textures. So I have all the sizes in my bag. Technically, we cannot use a nipple shield until your milk is transitioning. So you cannot feed with colostrum on a nipple shield.
Got it.
So most likely in the hospital, you should not be handed one unless you're there a really long time. It's kind of like trying to suck like honey through those like teeny tiny coffee stirrers. Like, it doesn't work.
That makes sense.
So usually I'm the one to hand them out at that point. I do love nipple shields. They work. It is never a forever intervention. It's a stopgap. It's like a pair of crutches, and then we're taking it away. So
it's the difference between like getting going that first week and not. I was so thankful for it.
Yeah. So the downside with nipple shields is during COVID, they stopped selling them in most stores. So now the only access to nipple shields is really Target or some like specialty stores, which I kind of think is a good thing that we can't get them at Target anymore, because people were just buying them willy-nilly and like, oh, we're just going to try this, when like you shouldn't be using it. And there's definitely rules to using a nipple shield. So I'd rather give it to you and size you and make sure you understand how to use it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So under the supervision of lactation consultant.
Yeah.
Well, and it was a light bulb moment recently. I learned that in the hospital, the lactation consultant might not be an IBCLC certified. She may have some
training, but I think they see just a lot of like routine normal stuff. And what they're seeing on day like 0 is different than what I'm seeing on day 4 through kind of the end. So, I mean, it's different.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned sizing the nipple shields, and I saw you post one time about sizing pump flanges.
Oh my gosh.
That like blew my mind, because I don't know. I think I got a couple options in the box, and I just like.
Okay. So in the box, hang on, let me get them all out of my bag. So I have all the sizes in my bag, except I'm missing one currently because I left it behind. And I have a bunch of different textured ones. Yeah, I have a whole collection, and these all get sanitized after visits, so people can pump on them and play with them. Oh, I left the other ones downstairs. All right, hang on. I find them. I feel like it's like the Mary Poppins bag that just like keeps going in the bottom.
I'm sure. Okay. You're going to pull a lamp out pretty soon.
Yeah. So I have these guys, which are the pieces that we use for like LV or Willow. These are the silicone drop-in inserts, and they get smashed into LV or Willow and cramp them down. So I can size you for LV and Willow. So
are those the ones that are like cordless or?
Yes, LV and Willow are the cordless pumps. I used to have an LV in my collection, and I got rid of it recently.
And that's kind of new. Like that felt like it really exploded in popularity in the last like 5-10 years.
They've kind of come out over the past like 4 years. They're the new thing. They have their own like quirks and disadvantages, but they are a really cool pump if that's something you need, that portability.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a 24. this is what comes in your bag. And
Right.
then there is a 28. I don't know where that one is. I mean, I do have a 32, which is like behemoth size. I've used my 32 maybe once all year. And then I have like the teeny tiny sizes.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is a 12. I will say I use my 12 a lot. I'm using my tinier sizes way more. I'm that really big 24, which comes in that box. Most people are not a 24. And then I have some Pump and Pals ones, which are just a different style and they have a different texture. These ones are kind of cool. When we have those breasts that like, hang on, let me stand up, like that hang down a lot. And we have that like lower set nipple that's almost on like the bottom of the chest.
Yeah.
Whereas these guys, when we have like breasts that are like up and that nipple is very bullseye style. Yeah. Most of the time we're using these like the traditional pump pieces. Yep. So yeah, I have all of them. I can pretty much eyeball when I see you pump, when I have you in the visit, I pretty much get like to a couple millimeters. And then I have the adapter piece, which just snaps. I call them like my Frankenstein set. So I can build them all. And then you can pump on them. I'll tell you which size. And then I send you the link to Amazon.
Yeah.
To buy them. It's on my like to-do list to like order in a crap ton of pump parts.
Yeah.
And then when I'm at your house, I'd be like, okay, well, you're a 12. You were using the 24.
Right.
I will sell you this for what I paid. Do you want it now?
Yeah.
I just haven't done it yet.
So nice.
Yeah. So most of the time though, like if you went on Amazon, when I send you the link, it'll be here the next day. So it's not like weeks to get pump parts or anything.
Yeah. Well, and I also have a question because I feel like maybe sometimes we feel like we have to pump or we're supposed to be pumping. Like there's just so much publicity about breast pumps. Cause like, yes, if you're going back to work, like pumping might end up being a huge part of your life. But like the first week, the first month, if you're home with the baby, like how important is it to fit a pump to you to be using a pump?
You probably don't. I don't know. Like it's really like so dependent on like, are we feeding amazing at the breast? Or it's like, is everything going great? Are you one of those people who's like being hammered by engorgement and we are like exploding at the seams and that nipple is disappearing because that pressure is so high? So yeah, we might pump a little bit more at that point. I do think it's a good like idea to have a breast pump. Like it makes me nervous when I go into your house and you're like, oh, I don't have one. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to be sending you to Target to purchase it outright if we're having problems. And they're like $150. So I don't know. I think it's a good idea to have one. I will definitely, during a visit, I go over how to use it because there are ways to use your pump correctly, like any medical device. And if you don't have those right sizes, you will do damage to yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
So I mean, there's like no like one size fits all answer. I do think in our area, it is a liability to have these massive epic freezer stashes. We lose power like nobody's business. And when we lose power in the summertime for a week and you have that freezer with 1,000+ ounces, you better make sure you have a generator or where is that milk going?
Yeah.
Or because once we lose those ice crystals, we cannot refreeze.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I also, when you see like the Instagram post of the chest freezer, you think that you're like way behind. You're like, I have a day's worth of milk stored. That's pretty normal, right?
That's
especially
pretty normal. Yes. So like when I have parents who are returning to work, I'm always like, okay, so if we are pumping at work, you're going to be pumping that full, like probably that full day's worth of milk. We got like 2 days worth of milk in that freezer. You have that safeguard for like 3 days potentially of not pumping. That's really probably all we need.
Right.
We don't
need that you're able to get enough during the day at work. You're able to take enough breaks to do that.
Yes. And we've usually like at that point, we've already talked about it. We've talked about like, okay, I understand how to use my pump. I understand how to clean my pump. I know how to set it up quickly. Like I have a plan where I'm pumping. I might pump while I'm driving in the car, like get it all set up, turn it on, pump while I'm driving, pump on the drive home. Like we have planned, like we've talked about this so much. So like, yeah, you don't need these 1,000-ounce freezer stashes.
Right. Like
so,
the power outage.
The power outage. I mean, like it's a real thing. And I don't think we talk about it enough in our areas. Like, yeah, probably 2 or 3 times a year, we're going to probably lose power. And where are you going?
We just did.
Thank goodness it was in the winter time. So you probably could have limped through by just putting it outside.
Go put your milk in the snow.
But no one wants to have to deal with that. I do try, like, in my practice, I can't be like the dealer of milk. But I do try and have like kind of like a running idea in my head of who is on donor milk and who isn't, and who am I seeing currently who has these epic freezer stashes. And I'll kind of usually put like the bug in their ear, like, hey, do you want to get rid of some of it? Because I do have a family over here who's looking. I can't be involved.
Yeah.
But I can at least pass you phone numbers.
That's cool. That's really
cool. As long as we're all consenting to it. And then you guys hash out the details.
Right. That's another thing is donor milk. I don't feel like that gets talked about a ton, but that falls along the continuum of how your baby gets breast milk.
Yeah. I talk about donor milk a lot, but I also feel like I talk about formula a lot because our goal is always like, we have to feed the child. Like child has to be fed. So I usually it's usually talked about like that. Like, okay, we don't have breast milk. Okay, do you want to use donor milk? Nope, not open to it. Okay, so now we're moving to formula. Like, cool too. I don't really care. We have to feed the child.
Yeah, for sure. What about like the Haka or like a manual pump? And the Haka is new. Like, I feel like it just came on the market like after I had my last baby.
Yeah. I do like the Haka. It's a great resource. I definitely have some families who respond really great to the Haka. Like just for like stimulating milk production. I will say Haka is one of those like double-edged swords where like it will take you to that oversupply very quickly.
Good to know.
So if you're one of those people who's like flooding that sucker out every time, I'll probably get a phone call from you about at 8 weeks or something saying like, oh yeah, my baby's kind of struggling. And I'm like, well, how many times a day are you pumping? And they'll be like, oh, I use the Haka at every feed and get 4 ounces. I'm like, well, so let's do some math. We have created an oversupply and now we need to work out to go down to not have that. So
yeah, such a balance.
It is a balance. It is a really nice tool though, especially like when we're doing like that engorgement phase. You can pop it on one side, feed on the other, but just don't use it continuously unless we have a low supply and then I need you to use it to generate that supply.
Well, and I also like with the last baby, it was the only time I saw milk catchers. And I use those to like varying degrees of success because you're tired and not paying attention. And then you like lean back and all of a sudden all the milk you just caught is like all over you. And you're like, no.
Yeah.
So, but I thought that because you're not stimulating anything extra, you're catching that. You're catching precious milk.
Yes. I do like those. I really like the Haka ladybugs recently too, because you can get a little suction, but you can't get crazy suction like those traditional Hakas. I like the ladybugs because it's a little more like it flows on the chest a little bit better. That Haka is just kind of big and bulky.
Yeah.
And stuff. So I don't know. Breastfeeding is it's a marketing ploy. So like, what do you want to spend your money on that you need versus you don't need?
For me, it was nipple cream. Like that was important. And I guess that's my question is, so I had mastitis a couple times with 2 of my babies. And I'm still trying to solve for like how I could have prevented it better. I guess, what are your tips for that?
Mastitis is, it's one of those infections. It's an infection in the breast. Our protocols over the last year have definitely changed in how we treat and assess mastitis. Some people can definitely get away with like homeopathic treatments and remedies, which if that's your comfort level, that's fine. It is not mine in private practice, but if you're comfortable trying it, go for it. But I make no promises about what's going to happen with it. You're typically most prone to it in the first 2 weeks postpartum because your milk supply is so high and then it kind of like settles down. When you overdo it, you get mastitis as your body's saying like, sit down, I need to rest. I need to recover. If we have open wounds on our nipples, that bacteria crawls up in there.
Yeah.
And then if I catch you having that open wound on that nipple, and then now we're slapping nipple cream on top of it, we now have that bacteria being trapped into that wound. And that nipple cream is so sticky and tacky, it's providing that surface for that bacteria to come up.
Okay. That makes sense.
So if I saw you and that was going on, to probably say, hey, we're going to knock off the nipple cream. I'm going to probably have you wash your nipples, which is the concept because we have an open wound. And if it was like on my finger, I'd be obsessively telling my 5-year-old, hey, wash your finger, use the soap. but we don't do that to our nipples.
Yeah. Well, it's also so painful. Like taking a shower
Right. Yes.
and your nipples are so, like I remember wearing a sports bra and it still hurt through the sports bra. So the idea of washing it.
It's like a friction burn. I mean, it's chafing basically sometimes. I'd probably have you switch to like silverettes. Have you seen those? Oh, I have one right here. Mine is really dirty because it lives in a box. So this is silverettes.
Ooh.
You can find them on Amazon. And then this is it. It is basically a silver pasty and it goes in your shirt. Mine was shiny at one time. But it's medical grade 925 silver. So it heals, soothes, it's antibacterial and antifungal. It's really lightweight. And you just drop it in your shirt.
Where was that 5 and 8 and 11 years ago?
Like these came out like during COVID. I feel like they gained a lot of popularity. They're really cool. You can get them on Amazon. They're like $60. They're kind of expensive. They do have some knockoffs on Amazon. So I would say do what you're comfortable with, but they work really well. And much rather have you use these guys than tacky nipple cream.
Yeah. Well, it's just like, you need some sort of like safety bubble. And it looks like maybe that is providing it.
I think that's why I like the silverette so much, because they provide that like barrier where that shirt isn't sticking to that wound, and then your nipple's not being compressed, and then you're not like ripping out that.
That's the worst part. Yeah. That
wound. So I do like those. Medela also makes these little like Tupperware dummy guys.
Okay.
They're called Medela soft shells.
Yeah.
And those guys are nice too, because they like collect a little bit of milk in the bottom and they have these huge holes. So like the nipple can breathe.
Yes.
It's that same kind of idea, though. The soft shells work nice if you're using that all-purpose nipple ointment with the steroid, but not everyone loves that. So the silverettes would be kind of the thing to use.
Interesting. At least there's just, any sort of guidance. I think that might be my new go-to baby shower gift will be those silverettes.
The silverettes. Yes, they're super cool. I really like them. Just not everyone wants to spend the money on them and stuff, but.
But that's the thing. Well, so I'm also part of what I'm doing is I want to bring awareness to the idea that for your baby registry, you can ask people to provide funds to hire a doula or a lactation consultant or like the services you're going to need instead of all of the stuff. But like keeping your nipples safe and comfortable is like a really important part.
Yeah. I mean, like I would definitely like the silverettes, and it's an easy thing. They're on Amazon. If you had like an Amazon registry, those are great. I do love those like ice pack, like those breast shaped ice packs, and those heating massage devices too. La Vie makes one, and then Frida makes one. And I've seen a lot of great things with those, but if you don't have one, your electric toothbrush also vibrates. And if you like roll that through your breast, it probably does the same thing.
Yep.
But it's up to you on how much you want to spend.
Yeah. But just the big idea that you really have to take care of like your breast and your nipples, and you kind of have to stay on top of it or things get really bad really quickly.
They do. I mean, I've seen a lot of people who like, we do fine. And sometimes I just show up and it's like this happy-go-lucky, okay, I'll see you a couple times. Let me weigh your baby. Let me sit here and talk to you for a half hour and then I'm out.
That's great.
I love those.
Sure.
Especially after like weeks of like terrible visits where I have to work really hard.
Yeah.
But I mean, stuff like that is easy.
I think the most common challenge I hear just anecdotally from people is low supply. I have a low supply. I'm not making enough milk. We have to use formula. And I am not a lactation consultant. So I never want to jump in with advice, especially because I don't know all the details. But I want to make sure that they know when you are feeding formula, if you are not stimulating milk production, at the same time, you're just going to keep getting less supply. Like the solution is going to exacerbate the problem. And I don't want to be preachy, but I just want to make sure they know that. And I don't know, like, am I on the right track that
you are? Yeah. So if that full bottle of formula isn't used, or like we're topping baby off, you should be turning around and probably pumping at that point.
Okay.
I think sometimes it's just culturally we struggle with like, I fed the baby and now the baby we fed, but now the baby needs you to switch gears and parent. And learning the difference between I'm hungry. I fed you. And now I need you to help me fall asleep. And I need you to help hold me and soothe me and parent me outside of your stomach that I don't understand yet. And I am fed and I'm comfortable, but I need you to hold me and walk me around and snuggle. And I think sometimes making that shift between those two focuses is hard for people to do, especially into that evening hour where we are tired. We are exhausted. I don't want to hold you anymore, unfortunately, because I am tired and I have done this all day and I just want to sit down.
Yeah. And a bottle would help with soothing is what you're saying.
And a bottle would probably feel easier, but you don't like, that's where like, okay, then let's bring you back to the breast. Let me feed you a little bit more. And then I'm going to pass you off to that other loving partner who can carry you and walk around so I can sit down and just kind of rest for a couple minutes.
Yeah. And that's probably another big idea is that we call it like breastfeeding, but in my experience, it's feeding. It's like calming down for sleep. It's, I just got a shot and I need comfort and like, you know, pain relief. It's, I'm scared. It's, I just want to be close to you. It's all of those things. So like a bottle is a bottle, but like the breast is all of the things. And so I think, am I wrong that the baby would just love to be at your breast like 24 hours a day?
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty normal too. Yeah. I think sometimes that low supply though is just, we struggle with, do we really have low supply? Like, is it a perceived low supply or are we, do we really have low supply?
Right.
During a visit, I can do a weighted feed. So I would have you like basically not feed the baby for about 2 hours before I got there. I'd have you feed when I'm there. And then we get a pre-feed weight and post-feed weight. And I can give you a pretty clear idea with a lot of like data history in between that like, yeah, you really do have low supply or you're doing fine. And I think you just need probably to hold that baby a little bit more. And the baby is just kind of telling you like, no, I'm not hungry. I just want you to parent me.
Okay. That's a new way for me to think about it. And I do like my second son, he got a rough start because he had to have a surgery like the first day of life. And so he was like really low weight percentile. And I'm so thankful that my pediatrician did not freak out. He was gaining weight slower than maybe we would like, but she knew how often I was nursing him. She trusted me. I trusted myself. And eventually we got him where he needed to be. She never once said, I think you need to supplement. And I give her a lot of credit and I give myself credit. Like we just sort of trusted.
I think there's definitely pediatricians in the area who are way more relaxed than others and others who are not supportive of breastfeeding. I call them the sabotagers in the area. And they're bad news for breastfeeding. Like, frankly, they give terrible advice. I think it's just kind of feeling it out. And if you end with one of those people, it's not the end of the world if you have to switch care providers. Like,
but how do you know? How, as the new mom, do you know it's bad advice? It's the only advice you've been given from a medical professional who's looking out for your baby.
I know. And then I come in and I'm like, oh, your pediatrician is terrible. I don't know. I mean, as terrible as it is, I sometimes send them back to Facebook and I'm like, I'd poke around Facebook, see what you can find because it all airs on Facebook recently.
It really does. I'm part of all the
bad rap. But if you don't agree with their advice, you can always shop out someone else. And I usually have a pretty nice list of peds in the area who are supportive.
That's true. That's another reason that you're a good resource is that you could provide that kind of information for somebody too.
I know who are the better ones in the area. Or like, I can be like, yeah, we're doing okay. Like, this isn't time to freak out yet. Like, let's give it a couple more days. Let's give it another week. We'll reassess. We'll reevaluate. I'll swing back by again. And then we'll kind of see what happens.
Well, because as a new mom, you are prone to anxiety. You are you are already worried that everything that could possibly go wrong with your baby is going to happen. So for the doctor to have the same attitude is not helpful.
No. And I kind of joke. I'm like, I'm the person I'm like, I love a good freak out. Like I love to freak out and panic. Like that is my favorite high ever next to a couple other things. And I'm always like, this is not time to panic. I will tell you when it is full blown time to panic. We are not in panic mode yet.
Yeah. You're like the flight attendant. Like if you're freaking out on the plane, then I know to freak out. But until then.
No, we're probably good. So I don't see bad things that often. So, I mean, it's usually just a couple quick fixes and we're back on the road. Like we're back feeding.
That's great. That's really encouraging. And so you are a little bit famous, right? Because you were featured in Runner's World.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you, about that story and about how
Well,
you
yeah.
relationship with runners?
So Runner's World put a call out when we were pregnant with our 5th child. It was kind of right before the world shut down with COVID, which was interesting because I didn't know like that was going to happen.
Yep.
And they were looking for an open casting for people who ran and had a running streak. And I think at that point, my run streak was like 3 years old. Yeah, it was about to be 3. We were pregnant, which I had a really hard time with that pregnancy because I felt like I had just gotten back to my groove as a pretty competitive runner. I was coming back hard. I had big ambitions and goals. And then we got pregnant. And I was just like, I was crushed that I was pregnant because I didn't want to be pregnant. Like we were done having kids. And I think it was really hard at the time for me to accept like, yes, we had consensual sex with each other. Yes, we did this. We caused this to happen. And this was what happened. And we were excited for another child, but I was pissed.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was upset. Like my world was going to change and I knew it was going to be another comeback and I didn't want to do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So this call comes out from Runner's World looking for people with a running streak. And I was like, I'm going to apply. I have a long-standing running streak and I'm pregnant.
Yes, you do.
And they were looking for people who were like ethnically diverse. And my husband was like, you are a white blonde girl. You are not ethnically diverse. And I was like, but I'm pregnant and I'm running. And my run streak is not dying today or tomorrow or the day we give birth. He was like, okay, whatever. So I applied and I was accepted and I went through this really lengthy interview and then they sent a photographer out to photograph me and the kids for this piece that was in Runner's World. I think it was like a 2-page spread. It was a really cool experience. And then there was a follow-up piece about, did you continue your run streak? Which I did. So we gave birth to kid number 5. And then about 12 hours after I got up and ran another mile.
Yeah.
And then we got a lot of shit for it.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't haphazardous. It was very calculated out what we did. Our midwife was definitely on board with it. My husband was definitely on board with it. My treadmill died like the week before we gave birth. So the new treadmill was delivered into the front room, which we have never had like a treadmill front room, like a treadmill like on the first floor of our house. It was kind of a joke. But it actually worked out really well because I could hop on the treadmill very easily, run. Baby kind of sat like in the little like bouncy seat right next to me and I ran. And we did that for the first 2 weeks, or we did that for the first week. And then I think they took me back to 3 miles at a week postpartum. And then I ran a 50 miler at 6 months. And then I've been back to competitive running since.
Yeah.
So I had to pump during that 50 miler, which there's photographs on the internet someplace of me pumping with LV and like one of my pacing crews walking with me and like we were power walking and I have like LV, I have the front zip sports bra, but like I can see LV in there. Sure. I don't think he had any idea what he was photographing, but like I'm holding that bra up and we're like power walking through the woods because I refuse to like let pumping stop me from my like race spirit.
Well, I just love all of it because it's like shattering our limiting beliefs about what's possible during pregnancy, after birth, like for someone who has 5 children, just whatever you thought was true, it's no longer true because you did something else.
I did it.
What else can we do?
I know. It was a very like empowering experience kind of returning to it. I did pelvic floor therapy. I was the one who showed up at that office 2 weeks postpartum because I wanted their clearance and their blessing to like make sure everything was great, which I did it. I've bounced back and forth into pelvic floor PT a handful of times since then, just kind of like little tune-ups on things bothering me and stuff.
Yeah. Well, and so you are in the minority. I would say in our country, most women do not. I don't even know that we know this is an option or like a recommended thing. Maybe just because you're an athlete, you knew.
I knew it was something I was going to have to do. And I knew it was something I was probably going to have to pay for because I would not be the person. I'm not running and peeing my pants.
Right.
but that was never something I did, even with other kids. We just did a lot of like core work and hip work and kind of some like rebuilding my glutes, which kind of lost a lot of like strength during the pregnancies, but I did it. And I've gone back a couple times for some other like weirdnesses, but it was a great experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're giving other people permission that there is a solution if you're not happy with peeing when you run or peeing when you jump or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that was part of it too. I think kind of this whole notion of like, you had a baby, you must sit down and you must sit for the first couple weeks. If it feels better for you to move your body, then just do it, but do it smart.
Yeah.
And make sure whoever is doing it with you kind of understands and is respectful to it and is supportive. But I think we were all very cautiously watching when I kept that run streak alive. We were all kind of like, oh my gosh, are you going to like pass out and die? Like my husband, that first mile was like standing there with me like, okay, go.
Yeah. Well, and I think we should say for most people who do not have that active of a lifestyle, and especially when you already have kids and you had a baby, you have to force yourself to slow down. Like, because if you try to just do like your normal routine of taking care of everybody, that probably will be too much for you.
Yeah. I mean, I kept my pretty high mileage throughout that pregnancy. And I went back to high mileage pretty quickly postpartum, but I was not the norm for most runners. I don't think most people are showing up to a 50-mile race.
Most people aren't. Nope.
No, with their pump ready to go. With a plan on how they're not going to let that pumping session deter that like race finish time. So but that was just what I was before pregnancies. And then this time I just was determined it was continuing on.
Yeah. Well, that's a big thing. It's like you feel like your identity is compromised when you have a baby.
And I think that was where I struggled that last time, was just like, I was under the impression we were done with kids. And then I was planning on running like competitive races before that pregnancy happened. And I think it just hurt because I was ready to go back. Like I was ready to make my return to running and competitive running, and now it wasn't going to happen. So
that's really cool. Really cool story. Really inspiring. You're a very interesting person. I'm glad I think I just saw you on Instagram somehow. And then I realized, you're local here, so I can refer people to you, which is going to be really good.
I'm here right on the Huron River, which is fun.
Yes. Hopefully it'll be warm soon and I can hang out more on rivers and lakes.
Yes, I know. I'm kind of hoping spring is finally here.
Did anyone tell you it's snowing on Friday?
But I know. I'm so pissed. I know. And I have to run 22 miles this weekend. And I'm like, oh, here comes the snow again.
I know. It's March. Is there anything we didn't talk about that you were hoping we would, or you think we should?
No, I think you covered it pretty good. You got a lot of it. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm passionate about this stuff. I mean, you live it, you see women all the time, but the average person still does not get adequate education, support, and, I
know. And I'm really trying to step up the educational piece of what I do. It's really hard to do all that kind of stuff when I'm working multiplications a day and then I have to come home and chart it. So I'm trying.
Well, and that's why I'm creating an online course. So the idea is that women can take it when they're pregnant. They have a lot of baseline information to start from, and then they can always refer back to it when they need help, like in the moment. So that was awesome for me. I hope it was for you too. And I hope we maybe demystified a bit what it is that a certified lactation consultant can do or what their services might include. Honestly, I'm a little bit sad that I just didn't realize, especially when I had my first baby, but even the others, that it was okay to hire a lactation consultant. That's what they're there for. And it sounds like most insurance will cover the services. If that's the case for you, and I do recommend you check into that, then absolutely use their services, because it takes away a lot of the second guessing I think that I did. especially around the nipple shield and the cracked nipples and getting mastitis and plugged ducts and all those things, it would have helped to have a professional giving me a plan, giving me some feedback on how I'm doing, making small adjustments, and just giving me some peace of mind that I'm on the right track, things are trending in the right direction, and she's there if I, do have questions or need more support. So I think my takeaway is I would love to gift Adrian or someone like Adrian in your local area to every new mom, to every pregnant mom, to have that expert making sure you're off to the right start. One point of clarification is that Adrian has the letters IBCLC after her name, which means she went through a lot of training and education and practice to be able to have that high level of certification. There are lactation consultants, lactation counselors that maybe didn't go through the same amount or the same exact training. They can also be useful. They're very knowledgeable, but just know that even if maybe your lactation consultant in the hospital is there, they may not have the same level of certification that Adrian does, or they might, but it's just something to be aware of. Something we got into a tiny bit is that your pediatrician may not always be as supportive of your breastfeeding journey as one would hope. Their incentive, this is just my opinion now, is to make sure the baby is gaining weight and is generally in good health. Of course, they may not be as attached to the breastfeeding outcomes as you are. So you may have to be your own advocate, or this is where bringing in a lactation consultant is helpful because they can sort of back you up or give you another perspective. That's their whole job. Pediatricians have a lot going on. They have a lot of competing priorities and things to think about when they're sort of giving you advice about the baby. I have talked to many new moms who have left a pediatrician's office in tears, feeling terrible about themselves, feeling confused, not supported, conflicted, and sometimes they even change doctors because of the experience. But if I can sort of give you a heads up that you have permission to advocate for yourself and your baby, and it is okay to disagree with your pediatrician, it is okay to seek other perspectives, then permission granted. And this type of trusting your instinct, trusting your motherly instinct, it's just getting started. There's going to be so many situations and so many decisions you have to make as a parent that it's great to get into the practice of listening to yourself, taking time to reflect on how you are feeling about things, and not always taking someone else's opinion at face value. If you enjoyed listening, please subscribe so you can easily get all of our future episodes. Please share with someone who you think would enjoy what we're talking about here. And we invite you to go to empoweredbumpsandboobs.com and subscribe to our newsletter. And very, very soon we'll be launching Breastfeeding Bootcamp, which we can't wait to bring to the world. So if you know an expecting mom, if you are an expecting mom, please send them our way, get them on our newsletter list, and then everyone will find out the launch date and be able to join our first cohort of Breastfeeding Bootcamp. Thank you so much for listening, and take great care.